code review. So who am I? Well, I just told you. I'm a developer and consultant based in London, and I work with quite a few different types of organizations. So I've worked with code review a few different places, which I hope means that I have some interesting stories to tell. We'll find out. No. I should repeat the question. Mallory asked, do they involve beer? And the answer is no. So what do I mean by better? Well, it depends. What I want to do in this talk is not to tell you how to do code review, but I want to share some stories, some thoughts, and get you thinking about how you do or don't do code review and how you might do or not do it differently. What do I mean by code review? Well, reviewing code. But what does that mean? Well, I want you to think about a musician, and you go to this musician and you say, hey, what kind of music do you like? And the musician goes, I don't really listen to music, I just write it. And as professional developers, how many of us think, well, our job is to write code, but how can you produce something creative if you don't consume that thing as well? So I think an important part of code review is this idea of looking at code, learning from it, understanding, and then sharing those ideas back with other people. So, I mean, we have various tools, various kind of processes, and people will often say, you know, code review is this, code review is that. But I want you to think kind of in the abstract sense about the idea of looking at something, thinking about it, and then sharing your thoughts with other people. I'm going to kind of break my ideas down into these 5 sections. And I want to start with the idea of what you might do before a code review takes place. Kind of the critical thing is what matters. When you ask people for a review, what do you care about? Now, different organizations and different projects care about different things. These are some ideas. One place I was working a couple of years ago, they said, well, we don't really care about security because all of our data is public, so we're putting it on this public website. So if someone breaks into our system and steals all our data, well, so what? Oh, apart from all the user data, because if we lose all our user data, then no one will use our system anymore and we'll go bankrupt. So we really, really care about security in any code that's to do with users, but most of the data doesn't matter. So before you're asking for code review, think about what it is that you care about. And this will differ from one review to another. Also think about who you want to review your code. Now, obviously, if you're asking people to review your code, you want all this you probably want to go to the experts, the people who know the system you're working on. But as I was saying earlier, this idea of code review as kind of a sharing process, it's also really helpful to find people who are perhaps a bit more junior, less experienced. And if you've only got the experts commenting on your code, that's not all that helpful, because everyone is going to maintain this code. So you want to go to the more junior people and get them to comment on it. And it might just be, hey, I don't understand what you're doing. And if the people on your team don't understand your code, then it isn't good code. When do you want this review? Now, sometimes there's a feature that needs to go out. There's some critical business reason, perhaps some security hole. And sometimes you can wait for a while. So do you want people to think about this quickly, or can they spend time with these ideas at the back of their head? When you've written code, you've spent a lot of time thinking about it. You've been working hard on it. You've got a lot of detail up here. The people reviewing it don't have that. They haven't seen it before. So you might go and sit with them and say, okay, here's what I was trying to do. Here are all these ideas. The problem with that is that if they forget, or if someone new joins your team, that all that information is lost. So you might say, okay, I'm going to write a whole load of detail in the code review tool that I'm using so people can see it there. But then it's separate from the code itself. Perhaps you want to write a detailed commit message. Perhaps you want to use more comments in your code. So to give that context that helps the reviewers and also helps the maintainers in future. So that's the preparation. When the code review takes place, so I want to talk now about the idea if you're reading through someone else's code, thinking about it. I think you need to show the problems with this code. If you look at something and you say, hey, this doesn't work, you can say this doesn't work, but it's best to show why it doesn't work. And of course, a really good way, as we know with software development is write a failing test case. Show the problems as visibly, as clearly as you can. And don't say, oh, I would like it if you did this instead. Why would you like it? Just, give us the information. Don't just say, oh, it would be better if, or this is a best practice. Tell me why it's best practice. Don't just state preferences or dogma. And this is really important. The people you're working with today, you're probably going to be working with at some point in the future. And kindness is not just what you want to hear. It's thinking about the individual people you're working with. I worked with one guy who said to me, hey, Tom, I really like your code review because you go into loads and loads of detail. And I said, oh. I actually hold off on a lot of stuff because I don't want to be annoying. Would you like me to review your code in more detail? And he said yes. So the next time I reviewed his code, I left like 30 comments on it, and he was really happy. But I didn't do this to my other colleagues because they wouldn't have liked me. So think about what kindness involves. Okay, so that's kind of the review process. Once the review, of course, code review in a way can seem a bit like an obstacle. If you've written some code, you want to get it released. You want people to use this. You want to deliver the value to the end user, blah, 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 blah. So how do we get stuff out? One thing you might find is, I mentioned my colleague who kind of enjoyed all my detailed comments. Sometimes you'll find in code review that there's lots and lots of detail. There was a talk yesterday about this kind of a review. It was a screenshot of a review board code review. I don't know if anyone was in the talk, with like loads of comments. Now, if you find that your code review is generating lots and lots of feedback, it's worth taking a step back and thinking, well, how could I have done this differently? I think you can learn from code reviews. If you've been doing this stuff for, say, a few months, start thinking about repeated patterns that you see. Start thinking about how you can change the way you present the code review such that you don't get so many difficult comments. And this kind of goes with the kindness. This is, if you're the person who wrote the code and someone said, oh, this isn't going to work, one way you could deal with that is, no, you're wrong, you're an idiot, shut up. Yeah, that's a really good idea. So make sure that when people say, you should do this, don't just ignore them. Explain why you're not. Sometimes, in a code review, someone will say, you should do this. And you'll think, well, actually, I'm not going to do that. And that's fine, but explain why. Say, I'm not doing this for this reason. And everyone, we're all different, right? We're all special snowflakey individuals, even on a hot day like this. So understand that everyone's got their own different ways of being, and disagreement happens. We're never going to agree on everything. So code review, as I said, you're kind of trying to get stuff out to production. You're trying to get stuff released. And yeah, you're not always going to get your way. In fact, most of the time, you're not going to get your way. And it's best to just deal with that, let go of it. If you can spot some bugs in code review, if you can make things a bit better, that's great. But you're not aiming for perfection. Well, if you are aiming for perfection, be prepared to be disappointed. Now, tools. So there are lots of different ways of doing code review. And one place I worked, we had quite a lot of different code repositories, and we were using several different code review tools. So what I'm talking about here is the idea, if you think of, say, GitHub, you can go and comment on code. You can do so on Bitbucket. I've already mentioned Review Board. Gerrit is another tool that people use. So these are basically tools where you go and look at the commits, you comment on lines of code, and you say, oh, what's going on here? It's really easy to spend a lot of time kind of arguing about this. And one of the things we do as developers is we look at software and we go, it would be really cool if we had a code review tool that whatever. It just find something that helps you do stuff better. The place I'm working at the moment, on the project I'm on, we have 1.5 developers. Our code review is really simple. I go over to my colleague's desk and say, hey, can you have a look at this branch in Git? We're not using any software for code review. We just say, hey, I've just written some code, have a look at it. And invariably the answer is, no, Tom, I'm busy, leave me alone. But that's fine too. So, a tool doesn't have to be software. It can be whatever approach you decide to go with. Don't spend forever arguing about how it could be better, but do go and customize your code review tool. Don't just download some software and say, right, we've installed it, that's it. Think about how it could fit better with what you want. Tools, People don't have to fit with tools. Tools should fit with how people best work. And the way you best work is something you discover. You're not going to know at the start how you want to review code. So change your mind. Disagree, think about stuff, and change gradually. Don't throw it all away and start again because it isn't working. Just improve what you're doing. Okay, no, that's fine. Unfortunately, we've got a few technical problems, and I'm probably talking too loud and too fast. So I'm just going to, I've been asked to pause, but actually I'm just going to talk crap at you for another minute. So everyone who's watching in the few talk. Thanks, Nick, that was a good filler. Okay, so where are we? Okay, so I was talking about code review tools. Quiet now. Can you do that? Can you be quiet for a few more minutes? So I was talking about code review tools. We were talking about the idea of customizing your tools to fit your process and iterating, discovering how you want to behave. I mentioned that the project I'm working on at the moment, our code review is just going over to my colleague's desk and saying, hey, could you have a look at this? So start simple. Maybe you're not doing code review at the moment. And maybe you think, oh, well, it's a big process. It's going to get in the way. It's going to take time. It's going to be annoying. Well, just every commit, spend 5 minutes looking through it, and can you see anything obvious that's a really bad idea? Don't get hung up on the details. If you're not doing code review, just do a quick review and look for really, really bad things. And as I said earlier, I want you to think back to that idea of the musician who never listens to music. We should all be reading each other's code, and we should all be thinking about it. And if we have interesting thoughts, we should be telling people about those thoughts. So start simply. Okay, and that's basically my conclusion, that code review is something I think that we all do naturally because we're not just writers, we're also readers. And I think sharing our thoughts about code review is helpful and worthwhile. And I think that's about it, actually. This was a bit of a off the top of my head stream of consciousness. I guess there's going to be questions. Would someone like to wave their arm around a bit? Not about operating systems, please. We've done operating systems. We don't have any questions. Okay. That did come in 2 minutes, even including the delay. Oh, we have a question. Man in the... Oh, dear. What row are you in? You're not allowed.
I was going to ask the obvious question of, do you have a preferred tool? Or
yeah, that's a good question. Do I have a preferred tool? I'm going to kind of come back to the point I said earlier about context. Sometimes when I do a code review, I look at something and I think, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then other times, perhaps if it's a security critical thing or something where we don't want mistakes, I'll leave lots of detailed comments. So I think it depends on the context. If, my preferred tool when code review is very lightweight and just looking for really big problems is just kind of shouting across the room, yeah, that's fine, release it. But my preferred tool when I'm going to do an in-depth review and write lots of comments is something where I can select an individual line of code or a collection of lines of code, something like that. And I know I haven't answered your question and named a specific product, but those would be the features I would look for rather than a specific product. Any more questions?
What about coverage? Is it good to review the whole thing or just specific parts of it?
Yeah, good. So basically, when you're looking at code, do you review the whole thing or parts of it? And as I said earlier, understand beforehand. One of the things, I think you as the person who wrote the code should be clear what feedback you're looking for, and your reviewers should be clear what feedback that you want from them. And that's probably a team decision. And it varies. Sometimes it will be, look at all of it. Sometimes it might be, well, there's this particular function that's really the critical thing we want feedback on. So yeah, I'm going to give the crappy answer of, it depends, but I think it does depend. And that comes back to the iterate thing, that if talk to people about how the review went afterwards and work on what it is that you care about, what you don't care about. I hope that's a helpful answer. Okay, I don't, oh, we've got one more question. We'll try and keep it quick because I don't want to keep people from the next talk.
It's more of a comment than a question, really. On the subject of using tools and stuff, we used to find it useful to use not an automated tool, but a review board. And you can put your review links into your commit messages, and that would feed into our distribution.
Cool. So yeah, the point here is that if you're using a code review tool, you can link to the review itself from your commit messages, and that's often helpful. I mean, I think there's probably another talk about like what is a good commit message, and I think commit messages can reference the original business case, the ticket if you use a ticketing system, the code review, and I think really if you can interconnect as much of the information you have about all the different parts of the development process, yeah, that's a useful thing to do. Okay, I'm going to stop now because this was supposed to be a quick talk, and I do want to babble on too much, but I'm not going to. Thank you very much.